Rob, how's the nerves after last weekend? You finally got there in the end, but last 8 of Europe, and there's again a real buzz, a real excitement around the place heading into it all this weekend.
It's a funny one because I spent the whole week, the whole week really, right from the first time we got together, talking to the players about what my expectations are, and actually talked a lot about it's not the winning and losing. We need to get out of this win, lose, win, lose, win, lose, and everything's okay. Because we actually kind of got into it. If we win, things are kind of okay. If we lose, things are awful. And that's no motivation for anybody. And I kind of said to them, look guys, the only thing I'm going to lay out with you this week, or the only thing I expect is you can walk back into the changing room and you can be happy with each other. You can be content with yourself, what you've given to the game. And you can look at each other, you can be content with each other, what you've done for each other. You can look at the guys who were playing their 250th game or the 150th game, and you can go, I did everything I could for you. You know, you can look at the guy who's making his debut, you can look at the young guy who's coming into a game like that for the first time, and you can say, I did what I could for you. I'm content with where I am and what I've done, laid on the field. And I think the hard thing for me was we've had a couple of games recently, you know, the Quins away, Bath away games, where we couldn't say that to each other. And that's kind of what I said to them. So it was a weird one actually. By the end of the game, I felt the lads could do that. I genuinely did, and that was the thing that I was pleased with. So when a lot of people have said to me like when my nerves shattered and it's pieces. Obviously, the ending of the game and us having to try and score at the end, it was kind of edgy your seat stuff. But I wasn't sitting there thinking I'm discontented with this game. I've got real issues with this game because we fought, you know. Obviously, Montpellier fought as well. You know, I don't think the Montpellier coach can go away and be dissatisfied with his players. You know, they did magnificently. They had a red card early in the second half. You think what they managed to do, and they got behind us in difficult circumstances. Obviously, we've got some frustrations around the fact that we got points up, you know, and we didn't see it off. But at the same time, we went points down, and we had to battle hard to get to those points up. And we'd laid a lot on the table, and then Montpellier came back at us, and it was a great game, and we stuck it out at the end. But for me, it was all about that quality of what they showed as a team, how they came together, how they fought for each other. That was what was important, and that's the thing. You know, I said to the lads straight away when I kind of went back into like leading the first meeting at the start of the week. I'm only going to, until the end of the season, I'm only going to say the same things to you. I'm not going to try and change what I'm asking from you every week. You know, I expect you to work hard, commit to each other, sacrifice a bit for each other. You know, make ourselves hard to beat because we've spent quite a lot of the season making ourselves easy to beat around things like around penalty count, around some of our set piece, around some of our around just some of our errors in attack. You know, we've made ourselves a lot easier to beat than we ever have before. And we've talked a lot about that, and then we've talked a lot about our emotional alignment and what we want to achieve and how we want to feel about each other after the game. And that is it. We haven't tried to make it any more complicated than that. And that allows them, the coaches, just to put a plan in place and we get on with stuff. And that's why I was pretty satisfied. Now I've got to, what I really want them to see is that that's a baseline. All I said to the lads afterwards, great, you know, fantastic, really important game for them, for the club, for Exeter, for everybody. You could feel it in the crowd here. But that needs to be a baseline now. We need to be comfortable with that being a baseline, because that's been one of our foundations for doing quite well, is when that's like what you saw at Saturday is a baseline. Now we could have easily lost. We only need to have one knock on in that last passage of play. Montpellier go away, we don't even qualify next week. But that would have been it. It would have been one error extra. And we could have gone, well, there's a baseline there you can work from. You get a baseline and you start to win games. And that's where we want to be. We want baseline performances.
You and I have seen pretty much every home game here since 2017, that Slade moment. I've not heard Sandy Park like that since. And that, as you say, can catapult the side now, isn't it? That's big experiences for the boys that are leaving, for the new guys that are making debut last week. That's what Sandy Park, that's what Chiefs Rugby is all about.
100%. And I think this is what we've got to. I think we've probably forgotten it a little bit as a club, as much as anything else, and understandably so. You know, there's been COVID, there's been financial pressures, there's some well-known players leaving, there's the salary cap stuff. And I think we've all become a bit miserable and a bit dour. Do you know what I mean?
Bored with winning.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you say bored with winning, but kind of, I suppose, okay. It's okay to find fault a little bit with everything. And we've probably all dropped into it a little bit. And actually, you know, we need to find the reasons to support and the reasons to enjoy rugby and the reasons why we're involved in rugby. Like I've had these conversations with myself, you know, why am I here? What do I want to do? What is it I want to enjoy? What are the satisfying things? Satisfying things are just watching the guys go out and fight for each other and play hard, and have trained well during the week and done everything they can to prepare, and then they go out and try and play well. That's it. That's the most satisfying thing. That's what lets young players come through. That's what makes us feel comfortable with ourselves. To me, that's the important thing. And I know now there's still a lot of talk about one group of guys who are leaving, and then there's also talk about a group of guys coming through. The reality is it's not about either of them. It's about all of them. You know, that's the key. You know, the key is, what are those 23 guys who are involved at any one game? What are they fighting for? What are the guys who are not involved in 23 but want to play? What are they fighting for? Are they all in it together? You know, because a senior player, you know, I said this to the lads, it should be a matter of honour that you play well for a guy making his debut, or a young guy. You know, for a young guy, you know, you should be the one who wants to make it all work and is prepared to give all that youthful energy to try and mean a guy who having his 200th game or 150th game, make sure he wins as well. Or to give the guys who are leaving the opportunity to have a good end of the season. That takes everybody in the room to buy into that, but they have to buy into making sure the young guys have great games as well. And I think that's what it collectively needs to be about. That's all we're kind of talking about. It's the only message I'm going to keep giving, is that we just have to feel pleased with ourselves when we walk off the field, and then we can't ask any more than that, and we've got to enjoy that as a rugby club, and we've got to support that as supporters. And that's what happened at the weekend, is the way the lads performed, that it got the crowd living with them, and that's what we need to do. We've got to perform and the crowd live with us.
Key to success over the years, as you say, is hard work and just getting on with the job and that, and you could see that coming through. It's the message you've got to use now. Moving forward. We've got to get excited about it, and what we've got to make sure we do as well is that we're not one result away from going back to going, oh, here we go, everything's rubbish. Nothing is that highs and lows. We've got to be able to deal with the good and the bad and keep things moving forward. We've got to not get too carried away with qualifying, because if we get too carried away, then we don't have a chance against Stormers. We've actually got to get, you know, we actually have to, after yesterday had to be pretty low key. You know, it was a 100-minute game. Just a couple of, 2 days before. So first day's training was relatively okay, lots of walkthroughs, good meetings, got ourselves set for today, which needs to be a good day's training, because that's it, we're pretty much done other than a team run. So what we actually got to do this morning before we train is we're going to leave Montpellier, leave it behind, take all the good out of it, understand why it was good, move forward and set ourselves a new challenge for Stormers. And like I say, train well today, have a good Friday, perform well at the weekend. That's all we can ask. What you expected from the Stormers, new opponents, new everything, isn't it?
Yeah, well, obviously we've never played them before. They're not one of the teams we played in the pool. I have to admit, I like watching them. I think they play collectively really well. They enjoy playing together. I said to the lads, John Dobson came here, I don't know how long ago it is now, for a day. I had a really interesting time with him. Good guy. Don Armand was the connection. He'd worked with him at Western Province. Came in, and it was just really interesting to talk to him about South African rugby, and he talked to us a bit about what we did here. So I'm actually quite interested in meeting. I'm quite looking forward to seeing him again, and I think they look like a team that enjoy their time together. And he's brought people into that side who maybe haven't been quite successful somewhere else, and he's helped them be successful. And without doubt, they've grown as a team. They've grown as a team through the URC competition and through this Champions Cup, and that's what makes them dangerous. Alongside, they've got some very dangerous players in there. I think it's going to be a great challenge for us.
What sort of game do you think they'll bring here that perhaps is different? Is it almost a Southern Hemisphere game?
Yes and no. I mean, at the end of the day, they've got a big front row who love to scrummage. They've got two world-class props there. But then we like to think, we've got a pretty decent scrum as well. When we get it right. And I know people think it's been a bit of an Achilles heel for us, but it's actually not been in the Champions Cup. We just, probably because we've been allowed to scrummage a bit, which makes things a bit different. And I think that is quite exciting. We've obviously got to take them all up front. You've got to, because you don't have a chance to win an Ireland Cup game. And I would like to think there's some ways we can challenge them. I mean, you watch them exit. They got kicks. They got crossfield kicks. They got a variety of attacking kicks. They got a variety of attack. Some of it will be similar to Montpellier, where it will be bang, 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 and they're coming at you flat out. And you've got to grit your teeth, and you've got to hang on, and you've got to get the ball back in play, and you've got to put some phases together to challenge them. The challenges are kind of similar, but they just come at you slightly differently. And ultimately, you just turn the tide and make the game about yourself. And so those challenges will be what they're going to be.
Having that experience of playing in quarterfinals and semi-finals in the past, is that going to be crucial? Because realistically, you're only 2 games away from a final now.
Yes and no. I don't know with this group whether that's that big a deal. I think for this group, they've just got to be excited about playing in a big game together. That would be my take on it, because it's this side. They are kind of a game by game team, and I think we've got to focus on that a bit. Let's play game by game. We've got some youngsters in there. We've got some guys in there in key positions who want to play any level of rugby at this level, so they won't have an experience of it. So I want them to just go out and enjoy it, and a similar thing. I want the lads to get behind them and do exactly the same thing. They need to be there to let the young half-backs play. They need to be there to back up Tom White if he makes a break. They need to be there for each other. They need to perform, and they need to fight, and they need to be content with what they lay on the field. The same messages will happen this week as last week.
Final one from me, just on those youngsters, how impressed were you that, for three of them, they were making European Cup debuts from the start last week? It was a huge occasion for them.
It was, but they've earned it. It was, but they've earned it. Nobody got given a place last week. There was no, I know people might go, "Oh, well, Rob had to react to the Bath performance." I think I did, and as I said, I backed myself into a corner a little bit. But there wasn't that those guys hadn't earned it. The reason I felt it had to happen was because of how they played, and they were there. They'd been knocking on the door for a little while, and that was probably then that defining factor. I'm glad it worked out for all of them, because they all played really well. But we made some other changes in there as well, and they came off. But we've still got to not be afraid to make changes going ahead. We've got a group who are a good set of players. We had a couple of injuries going into that game, guys who weren't available, who are good players and have performed well this season. So there are options for us, and likewise, we don't need to be afraid going forward. We've got one or two other guys who are right on the edge, some of who weren't available the last couple of weeks with injury. They may well feature going forward across the rest of the season. We're going to keep things as fresh and exciting as we can, and it's going to be very performance-based selections, and everyone needs to be comfortable with that.